Hi everyone, today I want to talk to you about something really super important, and that is how to stop an argument in its tracks. I'm particularly talking about a disagreement with somebody that you're in close relationship. It could be family, or it could be a love relationship, marriage, and it actually works with co-workers as well. So it's a little counterintuitive, so stick with me and hear the recipe. And the first thing that I'm going to tell you to do when you notice that you're going down a slippery slide of an argument with somebody is to stop speaking. And the reason I say that is because we have a tendency when we start to get triggered that we either speed up or we withdraw. People have certain ways of going with things. And the why part of this is when you get into a disagreement, when you're triggered, the stakes start to escalate on everyone's side. And then a lot of times what happens is it escalates here, then it escalates here, and then people start to say and do reckless things. So the first thing to do when you notice that you're triggered, you need to have awareness. You need to know that you're triggered. You need to have a sense of, whoops, things are starting to go on a slippery slope, and put a timeout on this. So it's just about saying, I'm not going to say anything further. I'm starting to get myself upset and a little bit wired. And I don't want to say anything reckless that I would later probably have to try and undo, which is not always that easy. So the benefit of stopping speaking, and it's not to be done in a passive aggressive way. So it's not turning your back and folding your arms or having some crazy smirk on your face as though you've got the upper hand. It's really about communicating and just letting the other person know that you feel things are spiraling for you and maybe for the situation as a whole, but generally best if you only talk for yourself and say something along the lines of, I can feel myself starting to get a little triggered here and I need a moment to just quieten down. So I'm going to go away for 10 minutes or 15 minutes or an hour. Is it okay if I come back to you when I'm a little bit calmer? Because if we say I'm leaving and then I'll come back, the other person might arbitrarily say, well, you don't get to say, how this is going to go. So you do need to be very respectful. You need to stay in your own lane and not be over there in someone else's feelings. Be respectful and articulate that you're getting triggered. You don't want this to spiral into something more than it needs to be. You need a moment to regroup or a few moments to regroup, and that you want to come back when you can both share and listen, which means one person speaks, the other person listens, and vice versa. So it's really important that we do this, because if we both start to spin and spiral, of course the stakes get higher and people start to bring in a laundry list of all kinds of things that are unrelated a lot of times. So keep it at what it is, keep it simple, come back, reconvene, and then step 2, when you come back, one person will be in the active listening space, so they're not actually speaking, the other person talks, and then you swap roles. And for the person doing the listening, I would highly recommend that you do not listen just so you can hear and start thinking, they just said that. I'm going to have to remember to point that out because that wasn't a correct thing. And it didn't happen at 2:34, it happened at 2:37. So just make sure as best you can that you really listen with an open heart. So posture is important. When you're listening, if you can sit with your feet on the floor and sit with your arms open, your hands on your lap, and really come at it from a heart-centered point of view. And yes, you may hear some things that are not pleasant or are difficult, and yeah, you feel yourself getting triggered. Do your very best to breathe and stay centered in the moment and really try and take the information in. That's for the person listening. So don't interrupt and try your best to keep with the flow of the conversation. So don't get stuck back in the beginning and then you kind of miss the rest of the conversation because you're trying to remember what it is you want to say when the conversation finishes. And for the person that's speaking, I always recommend that you talk about how things are for you. So best not to say, you did this, you said this, you need to, you don't, you shouldn't. It's better not to start with you statements, generally speaking. It's better to say something along the lines of, when you were 45 minutes late for lunch and I didn't receive a text, I felt really anxious. I felt disrespected. I felt angry. I felt disappointed because we had discussed this before. And do your very best not to do the blaming, shaming, guilt on the other person. Simply do your best to iterate or I can't even say it, to communicate with the other person what's happened, how you're feeling, and what you might need. That's the really important thing. So then when you finish speaking, you give a little moment, then you pass it over and you allow the other person to speak. And they will talk, hopefully in the same way. They will talk about how things are for them, what they felt, how the situation was for them, and what they might need. And it does take some practice. It's an art. It's the art of communicating. And body language is very important, which is why I'm suggesting that you both do your best to sit in a calm way. When you start folding your arms across your body, that's very defensive. You know, when you talk like this or you talk like this, it's natural that we do things because we do feel a sense of vulnerability and maybe wanting to protect. But if you can come at the conversation from a space of wanting to hear the other person, wanting to de-escalate the situation, come to a great conclusion that works for everybody in most cases, this is the best way to do it. So you take a turn each on your conscious communication and you keep going back and forth. And if you feel things escalating, same thing. Just say, I'm starting to feel or notice that things are starting to get wired up. I need time again to cool down and chill out before I get myself too wound up. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to leave for 5 minutes or 10 minutes and then I'm going to come back as soon as I'm calmed down. Is that okay for you? Always be respectful. Don't treat a conversation as though you're the only one in it, but you do at the same time need to stay in your own lane. And as I said, if you can talk about your experience and what you're noticing and what you're feeling and what you would need, rather than ever tell the other person how they feel or how they should feel or what they should do, that is never going to go over very well. Okay, so these are some tips. And then I think the last thing to do is thank each other. Thank each other for making a commitment to having a really beautiful conversation where you listen, you take the other person's point of view, and you do your very, very best to go away with a new sense of understanding, a sense of respect, and hopefully, because you haven't let things get too out of hand and you haven't said some reckless things, you don't have damage to actually repair. You just have to make a new way forward. And all of this is great communication building, because at the end of the day, if the relationship is valuable to you, the way that you communicate with the other person is everything. Words have power. They really, really, really do. And your body language has power. So just imagine how you're being received by the other person and vice versa. Okay, hope that helps. I look forward to seeing you in my next video, and thank you so much for listening. Bye.